Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the special meeting of Operations Committee for November 23rd to order. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this afternoon? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda. I have Councillor Abdallah and Councillor Reevy. Those in favor? And that's carried. The minutes of the Operations Committee for November 17th having been circulated, I'd entertain a motion for their adoption. I have Councillor Lafreniere. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Plummer. Those in favor? Thank you. Carried. Welcome, Mr. Lewis. New business. The first up, we have National Disaster Mitigation Program, intake number 6.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Operations Department is seeking direction from committee on the submission of an application for the National Disaster Mitigation Program, also called NDMP. This is intake number 6. The NDMP is a federal program intended to reduce the impact of natural disasters on Canadians, with investments, particularly in this intake, for reducing significant recurring flood risks and costs and advancing availability of private residential insurance for overland flooding. The NDMP can provide federal funding for up to 50% of the costs of eligible flood mitigation projects, maximum of $1.5 million in federal funding. Although limited information on the program was available when I wrote this report, we have received a little bit more. We do believe that we can submit more than one application, and we haven't been told that multiple applications wouldn't be approved, but we don't have any confirmation on that. The latest information via website was just released on Saturday. Flooding is broadly defined in the NDMP guidelines and includes riverine, coastal, and urban flooding, as well as accidental breakage of retaining structures. Projects can address 4 streams. Those specific streams are flood risk assessments, flood mapping, flood mitigation, and non-structural flood mitigation projects. The project must be undertaken between April 1st of 2021, and it must be completed in total by March 31st of 2022. Project proposals must be submitted by December 1st of 2020, so next week. The ministry will screen all the projects and ensure they meet the federal guidelines, and then they will submit on behalf. Staff have reviewed the existing multi-year capital construction forecast and our asset management plan, and we believe the following projects may meet the eligible requirements. Project number A is Ottawa River flood mapping. The order of magnitude cost for that project is approximately $50,000 to $100,000, and that helps us to provide flood mapping along the edge of the Ottawa River, the waterfront in those areas, and it will help provide a defined line. So the next time we have Ottawa River flooding, as we did in 2019, it'll give us a better understanding of where that line of flooding may be. As well, it helps Colleen in her planning to help support building applications. Project number B, option 1, is citywide flood risk assessment and mitigation measures. We've estimated the order of magnitude cost at between $500,000 and $750,000. That project basically would look clear across the entire city from one end to the other, would take a look at all our storm systems, model our storm systems, help us understand the low-lying areas that could be affected by inland flooding, as well as the choke points in our storm sewer systems that would help us to understand where we could end up with flooding. This one is partially focused on climate change and the issues that we've been dealing with more intense rains. We're getting rains that are coming down a whole lot quicker than they have in the past. Rather than getting 20 to 40 millimeters of rain over an extended period of time, we're getting 20 to 40 millimeters of rain falling within a couple hours. And that causes some very serious flooding in the inland areas. Option number 2, Project B, is the Indian River and Muskrat River Storm Outlet Design Project. We anticipate the cost to be between $250,000 and $400,000. That project looks at the 15 storm outlets that are along the Muskrat River and the Indian Rivers. It follows up on intake 4 project that we did along Moffat's Point, along the Indian Rivers and the Muskrat Rivers. It looks at city-owned infrastructure, the 15 storm outlets that are city-owned infrastructure, and helps us to understand what is happening with those, what we can do to help mitigate potential flooding caused by those outlets, and protect those outlets a little bit more. Project B, option number 3, is the Moffat Street slope stability design. We're still doing some research on the guidelines that have been provided for us, understanding that structural mitigation projects are not eligible. So we can't actually go into Moffat's Point and do any work. We can't go in there and build any of the mitigation measures that were brought up in the last report from intake number 4. That's not eligible under this program. However, we feel we might be able to get the design done and put on the shelf. We're still looking into whether or not that would be an eligible project, and whether or not we could use this intake to get that work done for the private properties along Moffat. Staff will attempt to combine options 1 and 2 under project B, but we need a little bit more information as well to see if we can combine those two. They're closely matched. The inland flooding and the storm sewer mitigation measures clear across the city, and that storm sewer or storm outlet design on the Indian Rivers and the Muskrat River, they may be considered one project. So we're hoping to look into that. As far as financial implications are concerned, there is no financial implication at this time, but proponents are required to fund at least 50% of the remaining project costs. So we would be responsible for 50% of the order of magnitude costs that I've completed in that report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Questions, comments, Your Worship?
I just have a comment and a question for Mr. Lewis, and this is just to update council. As you realize, I'm looking at basically option 3, but when we're looking at the Moffat Street slope stability, everyone is well aware. We go right back to 2017 with the flood, and then also 2019. We were fortunate enough in 2019 to have Minister Clark up here in Pembroke, and he visited the area along with his some of his staff, as well as, of course, Mr. Yakubuski. I think what was since that time, I know there was, well, everybody's well aware of the consultant's report in regards to the stability. The cost of mitigation was anywhere from probably $4 million to $22 million to get it done, which, of course, as a municipality, we can't even think of looking at, even though from our point of view, basically, we're looking at it that it's up to the province and the federal government to come up with the funding in regards to this particular mitigation. So where we're at now is I've been trying for about 6 months to arrange a meeting with Minister Clark, Minister Yakubuski, and the staffs, and our operations department is being represented by Marielle. We did have one meeting. Now, Mr. Alan Hyde, who worked for the ministry for several years and retired, has basically been the front person trying to look at this material, putting things together and what would be realistic for Pembroke. So I'm meeting with Minister Yakubuski on Friday to discuss items of Pembroke, and again, one of the main items is going to be a meeting with Mr. Clark in regards to the mitigation. So I guess my questions, I think realistically, and Mr. Lewis, I want your comments on this as well, we're probably looking at the mitigation, a minimum, I would say, of 4 million and going up. In regards to option 3, as you're listed here, I was just concerned that it doesn't look like you're able to do any mitigation as such with the way the application is. The second point is the maximum here we're looking at is 1.5 million. So I guess if we don't select option 3, or maybe as a council will decide to go, okay, let's go with all 3 options and combining 1 and 2 as you suggested. But with the work we're trying to do with the minister now, and I'll make it quite clear to Minister Yakubuski that we can't wait any longer. You know, we waited now 5 years or 4 years. So I'm looking for some comments from yourself that, for instance, if we did not get an application in regards to option 3, would that indicate to the Minister Clark that we may not see that as the main priority? Like, I'd like your feelings on this particular one.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't believe that to be the case. Option 3, the mitigation measures for the slides that have happened along Moffat's Point, don't necessarily fit real well with the program for intake number 6. Intake number 6 is looking at mitigation. Moffat's Point isn't necessarily flood mitigation. It's more to rehabilitate what has happened with the last flood.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Brian, but really bad audio. I see that Christine's straining here too. There's a big echo. So I don't know if there's 2 mics on.
I think there may be some background coming from council chambers. I'm not sure if somebody has their mic on there or not. That might be better there.
Much better, thank you.
Okay, I'll carry on. So the concern with Project B, option number 3, the mitigation measures to correct the slides that have happened at the last flooding, doesn't necessarily meet the program in the sense it's not mitigating future flooding. It's correcting issues from the last flooding that we had. It may not be as successful. I'm not going to say it wouldn't be successful in the intake. It may not be as successful. The operations department is also dealing with the NDMP program team with intake number 4, which is where we did the study on the Moffat Street slides. We didn't use all the allocation or the budget that was provided to us in that intake to see if we can go a little bit further and do some design of the program that Mr. Hyde is discussing, that $4 to $5 million project. We're wondering if we can extend our intake number 4 application a little longer, get an extension to the completion date so that we can try and get some of the design done then and put it on the shelf, hoping that there could be some mitigation monies in the future. I can't say for sure that that's going to happen, but it is something we're talking with the ministry about. We've had a discussion with the program director for NDMP, and they're looking at a number of projects that did not get completed in intake number 5, and there may be, can't say for sure, but there may be some funds that might be available down the road, and we might be able to look at it from there. The other projects that are listed in my list, and I'm sorry I'm taking up so much time, but the other projects listed in my list seem to fit the program a little bit better and may have a little bit more success. Hope that answered your question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, it does, Brian. Thank you. And I guess one last question is in regards to where you mentioned that the projects can address 4 streams and non-structural flood mitigation. So what we're trying to do, I'm assuming, is structural mitigation. So that would not be covered under here? Or am I interpreting this correct? Non-structural flood mitigation is what's permitted under this particular?
So you are correct. Non-structural mitigation is permissible or eligible under this program. Non-structural would be planting of trees, planting of grasses, those type of things to help hold the slopes together. As we're well aware, the Moffat Street slides are a little bit more extensive than just planting some trees to hold the slope. So the requirements to rehab after the slides of 2019 along Moffat's Point would be considered structural mitigation and would not fit this program to get that construction done.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from Councillor Plummer?
I guess going back to what Brian said earlier, that there wasn't a limit on how many ones we could apply for. There's certainly, but that sounds, I would have no problem applying for grants and see what, if we do get approved, and then we can discuss real money. The only thing I would say, that would be on the next meeting when we start discussing if we do get approved, are we throwing money at something to never actually get it done, like the Moffett Street slope stability? If it's $4 million down the road, I'm sorry, we got pools, we've got other things we need to think about and plan for. And people, I think actually Deputy Mayor made a comment, when you buy a house, you do a title search and you kind of know what you're buying. If you buy on a slope, you know that there is a risk. So that's on your title insurance or however it goes. I'm not sure word for word what Deputy Mayor commented before, but buyer beware, so I certainly don't have an issue if we can apply for all of them, apply. But, when we get the next meeting and talk about real money, I wouldn't want to be putting money at something that we're never going to get to. It just seems like a waste.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Frenier?
Yes, thank you. I'm of the same mind as Councillor Plummer. Not that I don't understand the situation for those individuals that live along that area, but I believe it's a separate issue. As the mayor said, if this doesn't qualify, well, then why would we go for even a slope stability design at this point? I think that the citywide measures assessment, I think that was B, and then B2, I believe. Those are things that we can be proactive to make sure that this doesn't happen in other areas of the city, or that we don't have all this water flow coming off too many parking lots. And we can start to do, as Brian said, plant trees, make sure that there isn't too much paved area if we know there's a water issue in that part of the city. So I would rather see us spend money on prevention rather than throwing money at something that may never happen, like Councillor Plummer said. So I'd be more in favor of investing it in our own infrastructure to prevent things like what happened on Moffett Street. Okay.
You, Councillor Lafreniere. Councillor Abdallah?
Thank you, Chair. So I echo what Mr. Lewis said. We're not sure about if option 3 will qualify, and we know the magnitude of how important that is. So I'd like to make a motion that we direct staff to apply for combining option 1 and 2. Thank you.
Okay, and do I have a seconder before I turn it over to Councillor Giacono? Seconded by Councillor Reevy. Now, Councillor Giacono?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My concern is it's not just the particular homes that are affected at present. And I know I certainly, if I was living in that area, I would have some great concerns, but it's also what's downstream of there. We have a library that sits, next to a slope, a non-sufficient slope. We have businesses. City Hall sits along that same riverbed area. So I believe that, there's got to be some remediation for the future so that these other businesses and buildings downstream will not be affected.
Thank you, Councillor Giacono. Councillor Plummer?
Question to Brian is, you said earlier, can we just apply for all of them? Because you said there was no limit, or do we have to just pick a couple options, or your suggestion of combining 1 and number 2?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we can apply for numerous projects is the information that we have available to us that came out of the last webinar. We are going to confirm that, but that would be multiple projects. So theoretically, we could have a project option 1, a project option 2, and a project option 3 and apply for all 3. We haven't received confirmation yet as to whether or not, if we get one that's successful, will we not be successful in the other 2 applications, or could we be successful in all 3? I don't think we're going to get that information or that confirmation. It's too tight of a timeline. The other thing I would caution about trying to apply for all 3, the applications are due December 1st, Tuesday of next week. And the standard application with staff's full devotion to that application takes about 2 to 3 days.
Okay, everyone's had an opportunity to speak. If I can just make a couple comments. I know where Councillor Plummer is coming from. My personal view is that if you start multiple applications and so forth, do you not dilute the possibility of getting it? I don't know if Mr. Lewis has a comment on that, but if you're applying for all four of them at the same time, does that dilute the possibility of the province saying, well, they don't know quite what they want, or they believe that everything is a priority when there clearly is some priorities that are higher up on the list than others. And while I recognize the situation in respect to Moffat's Point, and I know all the great work that His Worship has been doing, and I encourage His Worship to continue doing that work and to talk to the ministers and so forth to try and move those items forward, I can tell all of committee that Councillor Giacono and I recently met with Mr. Lewis, and we were talking about this number 2 and this number 3 option, or sorry, option 1 and option 2 of Project B, about how when you look at our city as a whole, when you allow works to happen in one particular area of the city, how it impacts other areas, and how we need to look at the city as a whole and have a cohesive response and a cohesive view of the entire city when it comes to matters like this. And I think it's rather timely. This morning on CTV News, Minister McKenna was on the news talking about a combined sewage storage tunnel, and how whenever there's significant rain events in Ottawa, they were having issues with sewage, frankly, going into the Ottawa River, and how this particular government seems to be committed to trying to recognize that there is ongoing issues with environmental issues that are different now than they were a number of years ago. And when it rains, sometimes there are significant rains and the system simply can't handle it. So a study that would be coming out of option 1 and 2 would assist the city in trying to be able to crystal ball a little bit as to what's required to ensure that our city is properly set up for and properly address the ongoing issues that are coming. So I thought it was rather timely that that was on the news this morning. The other item is that you can apply for all these different ones, but as I understand it from this report, we, the city, are responsible for 50% of the costs. So, can you possibly, how much money are you going to be able to commit to it, knowing that 2020 has been quite the year in terms of COVID, and what are we going to get ourselves into in terms of 2021? So having said all those things, I just wanted to indicate that I certainly support the motion in respect to option 1 and 2 of Project B. So does anyone else want to make any final comments? If not, I'm going to call a question on this particular item. So I don't see any hands. I'll call the question on this item then. Those in favor? Against? And it's carried. Thank you, Mr. Lewis, for that one. The next up, you have Emerald Ash Borer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Operations Department recommends committee approve Natural Resource Canada's Forest Services request to use the woodlot at the end of Dieuville Drive as a research site to conduct parasitoid releases against the emerald ash borer. And unfortunately, this is a quick turnaround as well. The NRCan needs an answer before December 1st of this year so that they can go ahead and start the program, to complete their applications and get ready for the program that would start in the spring. As we're all aware, the emerald ash borer is a highly destructive invasive beetle, feeds under the bark of ash trees, cuts off the flow of nutrients, and kills the tree. Some pictures have been included in the report to give an understanding of what happens to that tree. And we're all aware it happens quite quickly, less than a year before it can cause irreversible damage to a tree. The EAB was first confirmed in North America in 2002 and in the Ottawa area in 2008. The town of Arnprior is seeing major effects of the emerald ash borer within the municipal boundaries. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage to trees in the Arnprior area. And excuse me, NRCan's Canadian Forest Service from Sault Ste. Marie was in the city of Pembroke They were contacted by a resident in the Poplar Ridge area regarding suspected infestation of EAB. And while that biologist was in the area, they took the opportunity to look at some of the adjacent woodlots to see if there was signs of EAB there as well. In the woodlot at the end of Dieuville Drive, that's on the right-hand side of the unopened road allowance, there's a piece of property that the city of Pembroke owns, and NRCan was in that particular lot, have seen signs of potential infestation. They have not confirmed infestation, but there is potential infestation there. And it would be a site where this program might be advantageous for the municipality, for NR Canada, as well as for the local residents that may have ash trees on their property. So the property is adjacent to the snow disposal facility and the operations storage yard at the end of Dieuville Drive. We do have ash trees. For everyone's information, we do have ash trees at Riverside Park. We have ash trees at Rotary Park and some at Pansy Patch Park as well. We know that a lot of private property has ash trees in the area. So under NRCan's EAB biocontrol project, they've been conducting field releases since 2013. The release of another bug is what this is. Specifically targets the EAB, and it goes after the trees that contain the EAB. To date, over 291,000 releases in 26 sites across Ontario, Quebec, and New Brunswick. After 2 years of releases at a field site, they harvest 4 or 5 trees off the site. They take them back to the lab, and they rear the parasitoid bugs that were used in the program. They have released in the town of Renfrew in 2017 and 2019. It's a two-year program of releasing, and then another 3 years to study. They've done releases in the city of Ottawa as well, and city staff have been in contact with the county of Renfrew, the forestry staff there, and we received nothing but positive comments and positive reports on the program. So the biologist from Sault Ste. Marie is requesting the use of the woodlot at the end of Dieuville Drive as a research site. They'd like to start this in the spring of 2021, and they'd release the bugs, so to speak. They're a small wasp. They would release those into the suspect trees for a 2-year program and then monitor for another 3 years. The picture I've attached shows the triangle shaped property that is considered the buffer at the end of the snow disposal facility. So if permission is granted, we would not be able to harvest that property for 4 to 5 years. However, we would be making sure that it is very clear to the program people that we may have to do some cutting of trees along the Dieuville corridor in the right-of-way for the Town Line Force Main sewage twinning project that's coming up. There are no financial implications related to this report. NRCan is looking after all costs associated with the program, and the city gets the benefit of having something here going after the emerald ash borer, as well as for futuring this program further. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Questions and comments? I have Councillor Abdallah, followed by Councillor Reevy.
I just have a question, then I'd like to make a motion. For Mr. Lewis, the property that's opposite that is privately owned. And if the developer decided to develop that, when that gets developed, it'll have no effect on this project, correct? Except for your storm sewer installation?
Through you, Mr. Chair, any development of the property across Dieuville Drive from this program site would be unaffected. It wouldn't have any issues with the program, nor would it have any issues with the future development.
Thank you. So I think this is a great opportunity for the city to partner with NRCan to combat the destructive beetle there, problem all over the world. So I'd like to make a motion to accept staff's recommendation to allow NRCan to use this property as a test site.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Abdallah. Is Councillor Reeve, are you seconding that before you speak, or yes?
Yes.
Okay. And then do
All
you
right.
have,
I just a comment that thank you for the wonderful report. Very detailed. What I really appreciated was the additional information that was provided about the wasps that would be released to go after these EABs. Of course, after the year we've had with a lot of wasps, people are very nervous about that. A lot of folks with allergies, but the fact that these wasps do not sting humans is very reassuring. So I think that's a huge message once this project moves forward, that people know that they're not in danger. Anyway, it's great. Good to see this happen. Thanks.
thank you, Councillor Reeve. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Giacono?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree wholeheartedly. The EAB has to be eradicated. It's a parasitic entity that will affect, the ash trees within the area, and who knows what other implications will have on other species. So I'm wholly in favor of it. We all know the impact that the zebra mussels have had on the Great Lakes and our waterways. So if we can curtail this in any way, I think we should move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Giacono. Before I call the question, then, if there's no one else that wishes to comment, if I can also add as well, just to remind Council, NRCan is the ones that have provided grant funding to Ottawa River Energy Solutions recently to allow for the charging stations to be installed in various shareholder municipalities, including the city of Pembroke, which there will be an announcement forthcoming. But certainly I would have thought that it would look favorable that the municipality is trying to assist them when they in fact assist us with various grants. So having said that, I call the question. Those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Lewis, for bringing these two items, these timely items to us. And having said that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor Reeve and Councillor Abdallah, we are adjourned. Thank you.